Imagine walking through the most beautiful palace in the world, golden halls, sparkling mirrors, and the finest perfumes in the air. But then, a wave of rot and filth hits you so strong, you can taste it. This was Versailles, the jewel of King Louis XIV's reign, a palace built to show the glory of France, yet famous for a smell so bad, visitors wrote about it for centuries. How could the most magnificent place on earth also be one of the dirtiest? When the Sun King moved his royal court to Versailles in 1682, he turned a humble hunting lodge into a monument of absolute power and a gilded trap for the French nobility. But beneath all the gold and grandeur, life inside those walls was anything but elegant. Today, we're uncovering the filthy secrets of Versailles, where royalty lived in luxury, but no one could escape the stench. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and tell us in the comments which other royal or hygiene horrors you want us to explore next. Okay, watch your step, because when it came to hygiene, Versailles was trace mal. Beneath the gold, the glamour, and the gossip, the world's most elegant palace smelled absolutely terrible. And it wasn't just the servants or the peasants, even the mighty Sun King himself avoided something we consider basic today: taking a bath. In fact, historians believe King Louis XIV bathed only twice in his entire life. Twice. Ever. Trace nasty. Contrary to what we think today, people in the 17th century didn't view a hot bath as relaxing or refreshing. They thought it was dangerous. According to historian Jules Harper, many believed that warm water weakened the body and opened the pores, letting diseases sneak in. So instead of a nice soak, most people stuck to quick rinses or the occasional towel wipe. Cleanliness, in their minds, meant not smelling too bad, not being truly clean. Even the Sun King himself followed this logic. Louis would sometimes wipe down with a towel, dab himself with perfume and alcohol, and wash his hands each morning. But let's be real, sitting next to him at dinner probably wasn't great for your nose. And when he got sweaty, forget the shower, he just changed his shirt. In fact, Louis and his courtiers went through multiple outfit changes a day to show off their wealth and status. Perfume could cover the smell of sweat for a while, but body odor still reigned supreme at Versailles. Sadly, deodorant wouldn't come to the rescue until the 20th century, meaning life at court was luxurious and stinky. In modern times, answering nature's call is about as private as it gets. But at Versailles, let's just say, there were no boundaries. King Louis XIV, the man who ruled France, built Versailles, and called himself the Sun King, sometimes held official meetings while sitting on the toilet. Yep, royal business was handled while he was literally doing his business. At Versailles, privacy was a luxury even kings couldn't afford. Every noble had a chamber pot or commode tucked somewhere in their room, and if you were high-ranking enough, you might have even scored your own tiny closet to take care of things. But make no mistake, those little luxuries didn't help much with the smell. And for anyone wondering when the royal flush finally arrived, not until 1738, when Louis XV, the Sun King's successor, had Versailles' first ever flush toilet installed for his personal use. Until then, it was chamber pots, servants, and an overwhelming amount of eau de poupe. So yeah, Versailles might have looked like heaven, but it often smelled like anything but. If you think public bathrooms today can get bad, oh, you've seen nothing. At Versailles, the most glamorous palace in the world, sewage literally ran through the walls. Though most residents had chamber pots or commodes in their rooms, Versailles also featured a handful of public latrines. The problem? There were way too few for the thousands of people living and visiting the palace every day. The result was predictable and disgusting. The toilets overflowed constantly, and waste often seeped through the walls and floors into nearby rooms. Imagine attending a royal ball while the smell of sewage drifted in from the corridor. Trace magnifique, right? Versailles' primitive plumbing only made things worse. With no proper drainage system, servants routinely dumped chamber pots straight out of the palace windows. Anyone walking below had to keep one eye on the sky, because the next royal surprise could drop at any moment. And as we mentioned in our French Revolution hygiene episode, even poor Marie Antoinette wasn't safe. Legend has it she was once struck by flying waste herself. Sacre bleu, the palace of kings, dripping in gold and human filth. If the chamber pots at Versailles weren't dumped out the windows, they had to be carried to nearby cesspools. Massive pits filled with, well, everything you're imagining right now. And since plumbing was almost non-existent, most courtiers just went wherever they felt like it. Literally. Public urination was so common that seeing someone doing their business in a hallway or courtyard was about as normal as seeing a butler. The German Princess Elizabeth Charlotte, who lived at Versailles, was horrified. In a 1702 letter, she wrote that, "The people stationed in the galleries in front of our rooms piss in all the corners. It is impossible to leave one's apartment without seeing someone peeing." Trace elegant non? Even royalty got used to the smell, or at least tried to. Louis XIV eventually ordered the servants to clean up the palace once a week, but it barely made a difference. Eyewitnesses described the stench as horrendous, a nauseating blend of waste, rot, and stagnant water. The hallways and courtyards were covered in filth, and the nearby Avenue St. Cloud wasn't much better, filled with puddles of waste and, yes, dead cats. So while Versailles sparkled in sunlight, it reeked in reality, a palace of gold built on a foundation of garbage. By the time King Louis XIV died in 1715, the Sun King had lost every single tooth in his royal mouth. Not exactly the radiant smile of a god on earth. And the craziest part? He wasn't alone. Tooth rot was practically a fashion statement at Versailles. In the 17th century, France fell head over heels for one of history's sweetest and most destructive luxuries: refined sugar. Aristocrats couldn't get enough of it. Candied fruits, sweet pastries, and chocolate became the ultimate symbols of wealth and sophistication. The problem? No one cared about brushing. The result? A court full of people smiling through blackened gums and missing teeth. Ironically, even as rotting teeth spread through the palace, having a perfect mouth became a beauty obsession. A 17th century guide called the School of Venus claimed that a beautiful woman should have even and very white teeth. So, courtiers turned to desperate fixes, powders, homemade mouthwashes, and whitening concoctions that probably did more harm than good. Thanks to early advances in dentistry, oral hygiene slowly became a sign of elegance by the mid-18th century. But for Louis XIV and his toothless court, it was already too late. Versailles might have glimmered with gold, but behind those jeweled smiles, decay was the real royal accessory. Versailles wasn't just the center of royal power, it was also the center of royal pleasure. Behind the palace's glittering halls and strict etiquette, the place was basically the 17th century version of Vegas. After Louis XIV moved his court to the former hunting lodge, nobles, servants, and workers flooded the area. And according to first-hand accounts, the forests surrounding the palace became an open-air brothel. Sex workers roamed freely, offering their services to anyone with the right connections or the right coins. But here's the twist: while Louis publicly condemned this moral decay, he was privately one of its most enthusiastic participants. He had multiple mistresses throughout his reign, some official, others very much not. A ruler preaching virtue while doing the opposite? Hard to imagine, right? If the smell and scandals of Versailles weren't enough, the fashion choices really sealed the deal. In an attempt to hide his thinning hair, Louis XIV helped turn elaborate wigs into the ultimate French fashion statement, and the best part? They doubled as portable lice traps. That's right, those towering, powdered wigs weren't just about style, they were a survival strategy. Men at court shaved their heads to avoid lice and wore wigs instead, which could be boiled clean when they inevitably got infested. Women, however, usually didn't shave their heads, so the lice just stayed with them. So, while the Sun King's court dazzled with diamonds and silk, it also crawled, quite literally, with tiny, unwanted guests. At Versailles, the palace of gold and glamour, even the food could kill you. And yes, we mean literally. The palace's terrible plumbing wasn't just a stench problem, it was a threat to everyone's stomach. On at least one notorious occasion, sewage seeped into Marie Antoinette's private kitchens, contaminating meals meant for the royal family. Despite hand-washing rituals at the table, hygiene in food prep was inconsistent at best. The result? Courtiers regularly hosted unwanted guests in their intestines, tapeworms and other parasites. Louis XIV himself wasn't spared. During one particularly nasty bout of tapeworm, he reportedly expelled a worm nearly 6 inches long. Imagine sitting down for dinner with the Sun King, knowing he might be carrying that inside him. So, while Versailles dazzled with gold, silk, and perfume, the real danger often came from what was on, or in, your plate. Originally just a hunting lodge, Versailles wasn't exactly prime real estate for a royal court. It lacked flowing water to whisk away waste and was constructed on what one observer called shifting sand and marsh. When Louis XIV decided to make it his permanent home, the palace's already terrible sanitary conditions went from bad to catastrophic. Unlike previous monarchs who traveled between multiple palaces, Louis generally stayed put at Versailles. That meant thousands of courtiers, servants, and visitors congregated in one place, producing mountains of filth that even the most devoted staff couldn't manage. The result? A palace that glittered in gold but reeked of waste, a luxurious nightmare hiding in plain sight. Versailles was filthy, but the great place if you happen to be a cat person. In fact, any visitor to Versailles would have seen cats, both domestic and feral, throughout the palace estate. Some members of court brought their own pets, and the heaps of food of waste attracted rodents, which in turn attracted the cats that hunted them. Of course, the presence of so many cats led to even more sanitation problems. Feline droppings could be spotted all over the grounds. Worse, the remains of deceased cats could be found along the town's main thoroughfare. The reddish-purple-brown color known as puce got its name at Versailles. At Versailles, even royal gowns had a somewhat disgusting inspiration. In 1775, Marie Antoinette wore a gown in a reddish-purple-brown color that caught everyone's attention, including her husband, Louis XVI. The king was less than impressed, comparing the shade to un puce or a flea. Despite the unflattering comparison, the color became all the rage. According to the Baroness d'Auverquerque, every lady at court soon wore some version of puce: old puce, young puce, ventre de puce, dos de puce, and more. Fleas may have inspired it, but fashion at Versailles marched on, stink, bugs, and all. Puce wasn't the only color to get its name at Versailles. After the birth of Louis XVI heir in 1781, courtiers marked the occasion by wearing a new color. They called it caca dauphin, or dauphin poop, because it was as brown as the infant's excrement. And you thought comparing the color of a dress to a flea was unflattering. After Louis XIV passed in 1715, his 5-year-old great-grandson inherited the throne as Louis XV. Recognizing the unhygienic and generally stinky state of the palace, Louis XV began several renovation projects aimed at cleaning things up a little. Chief among them was seeing to it that the sewage pipes were extended. This put a greater distance between the palace and its cesspools of human waste, which, if nothing else, had to be a good place to start. So what do you think? Would you have liked living at the court of Versailles? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.